In this lecture, I'm going to show you how to remove a node from the beginning of a doubly linked list. So let's go ahead and get started. For this method, we are going to call this shift. Shift's not taking in any arguments because it's removing a node, so we're not adding anything. Let's see. All right, so next we're going to go to our pseudocode. And we're going to do two checks. We're going to check if the length is 0. So if this dot length is equal to 0, then just return undefined because there's nothing to remove if the node doesn't exist, if a list doesn't even exist. All right, so check if the length is 1. If this dot length is equal to 1, then essentially we're just going to reset all the values to their default. So we're going to do this dot head equals null, this dot tail null, the length we're going to decrement, and then we're going to return this. All right, so next we're going to store future head in a variable. All right, so before we get started, let's take a look at this. All right, so we're pushing in 3 values. That creates this doubly linked list. All right, and the goal for this shift method is to remove the very first node from the beginning of the list. So we're trying to remove this 2 from the list. That will leave us with this right here. All right, that's the goal. All right, so in order for us to do that, the first thing we have to do is store the future head in a variable. So as it says, since we're moving the first node from the list, then once we remove that, then that would make this second node to the right of it the new head, correct? So for that reason, we need to store a reference for this store reference to this node here, the second node, because it will be the future one, the future head. So the way we're going to do that is I'm going to give it the name future head, and that's going to be this dot head. All right, this is the head, and to point to the next node to the right of it, we add dot next. All right, just like that. So now inside this variable future head, it's storing this node here with the 7. All right, so now that we have a reference to here, the next step is we want to have the previous property of this 7 node. So we want the previous property that points to the left of it to make it equal to null. By making the left arrow pointing to, or the prev arrow, make that, by setting that to null, we essentially disconnecting the arrows to the left of it. All right, so that would essentially remove that 2 from the list. So we're gonna do that right here. We're gonna do future head dot prev and set that to null. All right, so this action right here disconnects this arrow from the left hand side and essentially removes the value the 2 from the list. All right, so the next step is this currently is not the head. So now the last step is to make this, to set this as the head. So we're going to do this dot head is now the future head. All right, so if we look at our pseudocode, that's exactly what we did. So first we remove the previous pointer from the future head, and then we make the future head the new head. And then finally, we're decrementing. So we do this dot length minus minus, and then we're going to return this. And that is it. So now if we test our code, we should end up with this. All right. Currently, as you see, we're pushing in 3 values. All right. So we should have 3, but by me adding this list.shift now, it will essentially remove this from here, or the 2 that we ended up pushing at the beginning. So let's go ahead and run that code, and you see we had a length of 2. So length of 2. If we expand this, we see that the head is the node with the value of 7, and the tail is the node with the value of 24. There you go. And if we expand the tail, we can look at the previous, and the previous pointer is pointing to the 7, so it's pointing back to the 7. And if we were to expand the one for 7 and point, see what its next property is here. If we check its next, we see that it's pointing to the 7, so it's also pointing to the 24. All right, perfect. So now we have a shift method that is capable of removing the first node from a doubly linked list.